If the dollar implodes and the trucks stop flying, it'll be a massive depopulation that'll occur, because society will basically just eat itself. There'll be riots in the streets. It'll be pretty chaotic. And I think that it is planned, and I think that will be the way a lot of the depopulation occurs, will be through crashing the economic system.
Hey friends, it's my great honor to have on the line Max Igan from thecrowhouse.com. Guys, just a quick note before we begin. Max is essentially in the rainforest in Peru, so the first 10 minutes of our conversation is a little bit spotty with our Skype connection, but at about 10 minutes it clears up, and the rest of the interview sounds pretty darn good. Thanks for sticking with us. You guys are familiar with Max Igan's work. I mean, the whole world is, and in fact, it's my great honor to have Max on because I want to leave a history of what I tried to do while I was alive on planet Earth for my children to discover later. They don't much care now. That's sort of the nature of kids. And it'll be my honor for them to later discover this interview with Max Igan. Max, thanks for joining me.
A pleasure to be on here, brother. Thanks for asking me on.
It's my real pleasure to have you because, you're playing a central role in waking people up to so much criminality and spiritual corruption on this planet, Max. You're actually taking action. You're a man that backs his words up with action. Everybody should check out thecrowhouse.com. And let me ask you the first question right out of the gate. What can humanity do to take the power back from these maniacal powers that are hell-bent on enslaving us? I know it's a big question. I think your answer might be non-compliance. But what can we all do?
Well, the first thing we've got to do is break down the barriers in our community. We need a strong, united communal voice. I've been saying this for, ever since my first radio show. The power of a united community could achieve wonders, We often petition and we vote people in, we vote people out. We do all sorts of things within the legal mechanism. And sure, there are certain elements within the legal system we can use. But if we don't have a united community, it's not going to go anywhere. Unfortunately, communities have been designed and constructed and promoted in such a way that we are just always divided from each other. We're always at loggerheads with our neighbours or whatever, judging each other by what they wear or the size of their front doors. It's ridiculous, So we need grass fires all over the ground. What I've got going is a project called the Full Circle Project, which has got a community connector in it. So, because like everywhere I go, I meet people everywhere and they're awake and they say, I've got no one around me to communicate with. There's no one I can talk to. There's no one I know that I can get active with. So this community connector whereby you can log on to the Full Circle website, you can put in as much details as you want about where you live, and the connector will find other people who are logged on to the Full Circle project or signed up to it, who are in your area. You can do a search in a 1 mile radius, anything up to a 30,000 mile radius. So you can search like your local neighborhood or the entire earth, So you can find groups in your local area and you can create an action group. Find people who are participating in the project, create an action group in your area, identify a problem in your local area that is a problem for the local community, and then start addressing the abusive office that's created the problem, because all the problems that we've got come from legislation that's put in place by government ultimately. All the little social issues and things we've got. I mean, we can look at the controlling hand of who controls governments and all that sort of stuff and go down all these rabbit holes, but it's not really helping. I can prove it to anybody you want. That's the thing. There's enough information out there and enough conspiracy theories and rabbit holes that are being put out there to keep us distracted, looking for someone to point the finger at all we'd like. We've got to find mechanisms by which to take action on the ground. So with Full Circle Project, you can do that. You can find an action group in your area, create a local group, identify a problem in your area, and then go for the abusive office. We've got to address the abusive relationship that has developed between ourselves and government. That's really the crux of the whole thing. So, all the movements that we join, all this sort of, unfortunately, people join these online movements or action movements or us or whatever it is, and they kind of send off their newsletter or their $5 donation once a month, and they sit there and wait for the newsletter that's going to tell them the world's changed. They don't realize they've got to actually participate in their local community, get involved on the ground in your own area. And you need people around you to do it. So you've got to start breaking down these barriers. You realize that all this divide and conquer mechanism, it's all been contrived for us to just keep us divided so we can never unite against this system. And it's time we did it. It's time we stood up and did it. So there's all sorts of mechanisms in place. Ken O'Keefe's got a great project on the boil, the World Citizen Initiative, which is going to be focusing on legal solutions and legal pathways to be able to emancipate ourselves from any government or any system that is funding war. So we'll become legally and contractually obligated to remove all funding from any government that's funding war. And again, I mean, even looking at that, I mean, there's issues like Gaza Strip, and I hate to bring it up all the time, but Gaza Strip is an open war crime being carried out with the state of Israel. Just the fact that Gaza exists, just the fact that Gaza Strip exists is collective punishment. Just the other day on the news, they were talking about Turkey or some country, and they mentioned, the UN mentioned that the Geneva Convention is still valid. And I thought, well, that's interesting that you should say that. So that means that Gaza Strip is a war crime under the Geneva Convention, Article 33, and every politician in the Western world that's supporting it is a war criminal and can be arrested under their own law. So there's things like that. There's all sorts of stuff in place right now. I mean, we know the world's run by criminals, and we've got all the evidence we need to prove it and to prosecute these people. But without a united community, we're never going to do it. So people would have to put down their stuff with their neighbours and put down their stuff with all these other different races and classes in their community they perceive as a threat, and realise that they're not the threat. The government is the threat, and they're all war criminals, and they're all criminals under their own law anyway, and we have the mechanisms there to deal with it if we could just unite. So to me, that is a really big thing with all of this is unity. That has to be the first step. Without that, we'll never get anywhere. With that, we can save the world in a day, you know?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's just a super powerful idea. And you guys, the way you find Full Circle Project is fullcircleproject.net. And what a brilliant idea, as quoted on the website here. Now is the time to stand together rather than stand alone and allow these engineered mechanisms to engulf us and our children. By reclaiming our power, accessing creative tools to free our imagination, and by finding an authentic means to connect with other people who share our cares and concerns, we can forge a way to a future free from oppression. That's fullcircleproject.net. You guys can find like-minded individuals in your own community. And Max, what an inspirational idea. I mean, I interview people constantly about the problems, and here you're giving us a fantastic solution. This is a brilliant idea, and it reminds me of what one of my buddies out there on YouTube is doing, Grindal61, who actively every single day is bringing awareness and attention to Agenda 21 and UN Agenda 2030 policies rolling out in California. He and his team are going to the city council meetings. They're going to the secret meetings happening behind the scenes as these initiatives are rolled out. And they're getting in the face of these politicians, and they're educating the ones that are undereducated. And that's just one example of how people can take action and take the power back. Now, for you to have come up with the Full Circle Project, what a terrific tool you're giving us, Max, for us to get in touch with like-minded individuals in our community. Is this all your idea?
No, there's another guy, Matt Down, who actually created the Community Connector, which was, like I was looking for a way to do this. I've been looking for mechanisms to unite the world for so long, and then I contacted this guy, or he contacted me, Matt Down. He had this idea for this connector, and I just said, well, this is exactly what we need for Full Circle Project, and it just all sort of came together. And the beauty of it is, like, whatever project you've got, if you've got an action group dealing with vaccines or with chemtrails or with permaculture or Agenda 21 or whatever it is, you can bring it into Full Circle Project. You can log on, create an action group in your area, and just contact all the people in your area and say, hey, there's a meeting this Thursday night. We're going to have a meeting at this place. The topic is going to be Agenda 21. Who wants to come and participate? Or what topics would you like to bring to the discussion? You know, let's identify the issues in our local area. See, Agenda 21, I mean, it's a great thing, and it's something that people need to be aware of. You know, it's a great thing to be pushing and making people aware of. But is it something you can deal with in your local community? I mean, you could be bringing this up at meetings and show people how it's all connected and it's all tied together. What you see in Agenda 21, if you really look at what's happening in our local councils around the world today, these are all being implemented by Agenda 21. Even in Australia, all the local councils in Australia receive all of their information from the Municipality Association, which receives all of its agenda from the United Nations. Mm-hmm. So that sort of bypasses the Australian government and goes straight to local councils and pushes Agenda 21 around in the local community. And I can guarantee this is going on in America and England and all sorts of other places as well. So going and seeing your local council, I've been telling people to do this for years. It's what you've got to do. Identify an issue in your area and contact your council members and say, hey, when's there a meeting? We need to come and talk. We've got some issues we want to address. And just by bringing the issues up, even if they don't address them properly. But just by you bringing them up and asking the questions in an eloquent way, you watch these politicians scurry under the rocks that they came from, and it shows all the other people in the room that you brought along just how much these people are lying and evading the issues. Just when you ask the hard questions, just making them run the way they do just demonstrates to the public what a bunch of criminals they really are. So, yeah, this is what we've got to do. We've got to have these mechanisms in place, and we need to get off the internet. So that's what I'm trying to do with Full Circle as well, is like you go and log onto the site, create these action groups, and then get offline, get involved on the ground in your community, go see your local councils, identify these problems, unite with the people around you, and if you have success, bring it to the website. Post it there, show people what you're doing, show people what the action was that you took, or go there and look and see what other action people are taking and see what you can apply to your own community. Share with each other. Get these grass fires. But don't create groups to put band-aids on the symptoms that these politicians create. Address the abusive relationship, because you can go and you can go and feed the homeless all you want, but until you address the legislation that created the situation that created the homeless, it's just still going to happen. You've got to go and address the root cause of the problem in all these situations, and it all comes from legislation that our government's put in place. So we've got to unite as a community, and whatever issues you've got and whatever projects you're working on, maybe you need more people to get involved. We'll bring it into Full Circle Project, do a search for people in your area and say, hey, we're having a meeting about this issue, who wants to come along? And you'll find that there will be more people involved. So it's just a way of sparking these grass fires while we've still got a reasonable amount of access to the internet, because they're going to censor this soon pretty well as well. We're not going to be able to do all the things we can now. So it's important that we get these groups united and connected and operative on the ground now while we still have the ability to do so.
Well, Max, about Full Circle Project, I just want to say one other thing. You mentioned going in and watching these city council people and these government agents, these government turncoats, essentially, sell us out. The other thing that occurs to me, and I want people to be inspired by this idea, that when you go to the city council and you educate some of these people about Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, unconstitutional policies that they may be taking part in that they're not even aware of, you may be able to turn things around, because I don't know that everybody is sold out. A lot of people don't understand Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030, Max. And so for a lot of these people, when you come in and you speak about what's really going on, you can educate these people, and it's a little bit like showing a person a video of World Trade Center 7 for the first time. The person that's unaware that 3 buildings collapsed that day, when they see WTC 7, and if they are able to have any critical thinking at all, it's kind of a wake-up call. So I like the idea of people getting involved in going and educating those people out in our community that otherwise might find themselves engaging in these United Nations agendas, thinking they're doing the right thing for the quote-unquote environment, when really they're just selling us out, and they're selling out our economy. Do you agree with that assessment, Max? I mean, certainly not everybody is bought and paid for.
Oh, no, absolutely. There are a lot of people in the political mechanism that actually joined politics because they wanted to make a difference. I mean, absolutely. It's foolhardy to think that everybody's a criminal. The ones at the top, certainly. The ones who lead the parties, certainly.
Yeah.
I defy anyone to say that the world leaders are not criminals. Malcolm Turnbull here in this country, Barack Obama, all these people, Tony Blair, David Cameron, all these people.
Hillary Clinton, one of the world's uber criminals.
Oh, she's unbelievable. Just the fact that she's running for office is amazing. Shows you how far the American political system is degraded.
And how far the Mockingbird mainstream media is complicit in these crimes, Max, because you know as well as I do that woman should be in prison for her crimes against humanity and really for taking part in war crimes, crimes against the Constitution. And the Mockingbird mainstream media in the United States continues to trumpet her as, quote-unquote, the front runner. They just ignore all of her crimes, and they just report on her like she's just, running a great campaign.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, she's virtually, completely responsible for what's happened in Libya and Syria and a new Cold War that seems to be unfolding, Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this woman single-handedly destroyed so many lives. It's amazing, and she's a career criminal. It's ridiculous that she's running for office. It's an absolute joke. But, to think that everybody is corrupt is ridiculous. There are people in the political system and even within the police and military who will break ranks once they see what's going. I mean, things are getting pretty out of control pretty quickly, and it's waking up a lot of the people within the political mechanism as well. We've even had politicians in Australia standing up and saying, hey, look, I'm giving you 10 signs here that Australia is becoming a police state. And, he's up there saying, what's going on here? So there are a lot of politicians that are on our side, but they can't really see a way out of it either. I mean, the mechanism's in place and it just seems to be steamrolling forward, which is why we need a huge groundswell of people to stop it. I've always said protests are a bad idea and all this sort of stuff. It's just a waste of time because, a lot of protests, you just go and end up being corralled by the police and they turn it into something violent. But the TPP, I tell you, has really changed that a little bit. It's changed my perspective on protest to a little degree, because we've seen in New Zealand, like literally tens of thousands of people out protesting the TPP. It got to the point, like the New Zealand Prime Minister was saying it's a renter crowd, and there ended up like 25,000 people shut down the streets of Auckland, and the Prime Minister got too afraid to go out to Waitangi Day, which was a married celebration day. And so it is showing. And we had, 125,000 or 130,000 people marching in the streets of Berlin protesting the TPP. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are seeing it in their face now. In Australia, they're bringing in mandatory vaccination for pensioners and all sorts of stuff. If you're getting any child care payments from government and all, your child needs to be vaccinated. And this is happening while all of this stuff, all these news are coming out about children collapsing from vaccinations and all sorts of stuff. So it's coming home to everybody. It's in the face now. It's in their backyard, and they've kind of ramped it up too quickly. And the massive outpouring of people in these protests is causing a lot of the police and a lot of the lower level politicians to step back and say, well, hang on a minute, I might be standing on the wrong side of history here. Yeah. And it's an important time. So, it's important not to lose hope, and you can make a difference by going to these council chambers and by saying these things, and you are waking people up, even if you don't realize it, you are making a difference.
Yeah, and SB 277 is rolling out mandatory vaccinations signed into law by Jerry Brown, a complete criminal out there in California, despite the endless protests, really, against mandatory vaccinations. I really think it's a slippery slope into the tipping point, Max. I've said this before, that if they want to come after the guns, there will be a tipping point in this country. If they want to mandate vaccinations against the will of the people, that's the other tipping point. And they're pushing, and they don't seem to care that they're getting near the tipping point. Because as you've noted, Max, and I've noted, I think humanity is waking up. Humanity's waking up to the fact that this war on terror is an absolute hoax. I mean, that's absolutely quantifiable. We know that the U.S. government used to roll out this guy named Adam Gadon, whose real name is Adam Perlman. He's the son of a prominent Jewish businessman. And then suddenly in April of 2015, the Pentagon announced that he had been killed in a CIA drone strike, and it got no media attention, right? We know that al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS, also an asset, an intelligence asset. I mean, the world is waking up to all of this stuff, and I think that the elite don't respect the people to the point where they're going to push the people right into a tipping point, and the elite better wake up real soon, because they're going to have a problem on their hands when people wake up in mass.
Well, yeah, they are. And again, we've got to really be careful about this so it just doesn't erupt into violence and revolution and chaos, because that's what they want, order out of chaos. Right. But again, with the mandatory vaccinations and all this sort of stuff, if they're introducing this in the United States and you're having trouble dealing with it, well, why don't you look at it and say, well, hang on, this guy's signed the APAC agreement, the APAC treaty, because you've actually got to sign the APAC treaty in order to get funding for a political campaign in the United States. So basically you're pledging allegiance to a foreign power in order to run for office in the United States. What's that all about? And the foreign power that you're pledging allegiance to can be seen to be in breach of the Geneva Convention, Article 33, collective punishment, which means you signed an agreement to basically become a war criminal and to support war crimes before you ran for office. So how is any of your legislation valid? The UN said just last week that the Geneva Convention is still valid, which makes you a war criminal. So how is your legislation valid? If you want to deal with that, with the vaccination, you want to deal with the fracking, the coal seam gas mining, you want to deal with the wars, you want to deal with the austerity measures, you want to deal with everything they're doing, just identify the fact that every one of these people is a war criminal by their own signing of the APAC treaty. Therefore, they can be arrested under their own legislation for war crimes right now. They even said, like I said last week, that the Geneva Convention is still valid. So where's the issue with this? It's provable that these people are war criminals under their own law. All we need is a united community to stand up and call it. I've been saying to people, save Gaza, save the world. It's right there in the front of everybody's faces. All they have to do is open up their hearts to the people of Palestine. And the people in Gaza are mainly children. The average age in Gaza Strip is 17. So it's not only a war crime and collective punishment, it's open child abuse. And we can heal it, and by healing it, we can heal all of the problems in our own countries by identifying the war criminals who are writing all this legislation. It's a really simple fix, and it's right there under their own law right now if we choose to call it.
Now, I'm very familiar with AIPAC and the Zionist entity, which is strangleholding much of our federal government and some of the state governments as well, Max. Now, this AIPAC treaty, though, that you mentioned, and by the way, as soon as you said AIPAC, our internet connection got a little muffled there again, but describe this AIPAC treaty to me. I'm not actually familiar with this. Are you saying that a lot of these guys that are running for office, and I'm familiar with Biden saying that he is a Zionist, I'm familiar with a lot of these guys vowing to serve Israel even before their own constituents, and I'm going to play a clip. I'll play a soundbite right here from Ted Cruz, who got into it in a speech once where the crowd was opposed to his pledge of allegiance to Israel, and he didn't like that one bit.
Christians have no greater ally than the Jewish state. Let me say this. Those who hate Israel hate America. And those who hate Jews hate Christians. And if this room will not recognize that, then my heart weeps. I will say this, I am saddened to see that some here, not everyone, but some here, are so consumed with hate that you cannot address your brother. I will say this. If you will not stand with Israel and the Jews, then I will not stand with you. Thank you, and God bless you.
So I'm familiar with the Zionist issue, but what is this AIPAC treaty?
Well, the AIPAC agreement says basically as soon as you become a politician in the United States and you start going for office and going for funding, the AIPAC committee comes to see you and they ask you to sign the pledge. And you've got to sign the pledge. And if you don't sign the pledge, you don't get any funding. You won't ever get anywhere as a politician in the United States if you don't sign the pledge. There's been people such as Cynthia McKinney has spoken about this. A lot of people have spoken about this. Every politician in the United States must sign the pledge. And you're pledging allegiance to a foreign power. And not only that, it's a foreign power that is carrying out war crimes, provable under your own law. So you've got to do this in order to get electoral funding. If you don't get that funding, you'll never get any office at all. You'll never be able to get any position in government because you won't get the funding. You won't get any approval for anything unless you sign the AIPAC treaty, the AIPAC pledge. So basically, you're pledging your soul to a foreign power, and you're pledging your support to a foreign power in order to run for politics in the United States. How is that even legal? How is that even legal? How is that not treason? Especially when it can be seen that the country that you're signing a pledge to is carrying out war crimes, and because Gaza Strip exists, it's carrying out war crimes because that is collective punishment. It's a breach of Article 33. It's as simple as that. So how is any of this legal? How is any of their legislation legal? Any of the laws that they're bringing and pressing you people with, if it can be proven that these people are supporting war crimes, which they can because they all signed the pledge.
Yeah. Well, and it's evident now to anybody with a pulse, anybody who can think in this country and is watching the way that these candidates behave, and not even the candidates, the people in office behave, it's always Israel first. And it makes me wonder about the Samson option. What is the threat that Israel has over these people? I mean, it's just unbelievable to me because you're right about the war crimes and you're right about the Gaza prison camp and you're right about all of this stuff that you talk about. You've dedicated your life to shining truth on the Zionist entity. And I thank you for it because, a part of my awakening was 9/11. A big part of my awakening was 9/11. And it took a while to get ultimately down the rabbit hole to identify this Zionist issue. I've got Jewish friends. It's not all Jews are bad. I know now we're going to see in the comments, it's Jews, it's Jews, it's Jews. There's a Zionist entity. And in my notes before we began the interview, I was preparing, Max, and I wrote down this line. You tell me if it's not correct. Zionist Rothschild-Rockefeller death machine. That's what I wrote down because I wanted to talk to you about it. I mean, at the end of the day, isn't that one of the world's number one problems? Is this Zionist Rothschild-Rockefeller death machine?
Well, yeah, it is. It is absolutely. What people need to understand is that within Judaism, there's an extremist element, a mafia element. There are extremist elements that exist within all religion. There are certainly Islamic extremists. There are certainly Christian extremists. Look at the Spanish Inquisition; that was pretty extreme. And there are also Judaic extremists, Jewish extremists. But we can't say that. We get called anti-Semitic if we say that. And unfortunately, all of these Jewish extremists, this Jewish mafia, and like not all Zionists are Jews, and not all Jews are Zionists, but this mafia has infiltrated into all Western governments, and it is what's running US foreign policy. It's what's basically running Australian foreign policy, certainly running German foreign policy, French foreign policy. A lot of people are involved in this. It's managed to infiltrate itself into all Western governments, and that's what's running the show. Ultimately, it's a banking cartel that controls the whole thing. I mean, the banking is the catalyst. It's the glue. Money is the glue that holds it all together by keeping people in a state of scarcity by issuing debt-based currency. This is the glue that keeps us all running on the treadmill, which keeps us divided, so we don't have time to pay attention and actually sit back and analyse this. I mean, a lot of the people that know what's going on don't really work in the mainstream. I mean, I'm fortunate enough that I've lived my life as a musician, so I've managed to live outside society for most of my life. So I've had plenty of time to actually observe and watch what's going on. And I called all this 40 years ago, I was saying where we're going. I mean, I woke up when I was 4 to the fact that something was terribly wrong, and I just became an observer from that point. I lost it for a long time through my teenage years and my younger life. I just wanted to get out of this world and get out of this society, so I became a musician and lived on the outside of it and partied for quite a long time. But it also gave me a lot of time to research and a lot of time to observe. And when things started getting serious, I, like many other people, spoke out. Like when 9/11 happened, I started to speak out. 9/11 was a trick, though. I mean, we wonder why they made it so obvious. And really, I think they made it so obvious so they could find out just where the sleeping masses are and just where the awake people are. And then they made the internet nice and open and free for a while so they could track everybody and trace everybody and find out where all the dissidents are, find out which elements of society are the best ones to eliminate. And that's the way they're going. I mean, a lot of it has been a trap. A lot of what we've seen on the internet, even though it's given us a great deal of communication, there's been a massive amount of disinformation out there, heaps and heaps of rabbit holes. Like I said, I can prove, in inverted commas, that the actual controlling hand is anybody you want to name. Anybody. Doesn't matter which rabbit hole you want to go down, I can find evidence to support it, because that's what they've done to the internet. They've put so much misinformation and disinformation out there, all mixed together with truth, so nobody really knows what's going on. I'm fortunate enough that I've been traveling a lot for most of my life, and I've been able to observe. And just about everything I've called has been right. It's all happened, unfortunately. So I can kind of see where things are going. But there is a way out of it. I mean, if we can start forming these action groups on the ground and we can identify the real problems in our community, we can identify the fact that these people are war criminals, and in all of our dealings with them, to even when you're petitioning or voting people in or whatever action you're taking, you've got to keep it in the forefront of your mind that even though they're politicians and they seem important to you, what you're dealing with here is a criminal catastocracy, a criminal empire. And even though the lower rungs of this empire may not know they're involved in the empire, at the top, what you're dealing with is a bunch of criminals, really, a bunch of mass murdering, warmongering criminals, psychopaths. So you need to take that into account with whatever action you're planning. And sure, on the lower rungs, you can wake people up, but ultimately you can't let yourself be cowed and scared by their legislation. It's just fiction. It's just stuff that are on paper. You've got to be prepared to stand in your truth, and you've got to be prepared to die for your beliefs. If you're not prepared to die for your beliefs, then you shouldn't even step up to this game and step up to this plate, because it's really coming to that. You can't take a back step to these people, and you've got to be prepared to stand your ground and not take a backward step, and to call out these criminals where you may and where you can show that they are criminals. And if they're attempting to enforce legislation on you, you need to question the validity of that legislation if that politician can be seen to be supporting a state that is carrying out war crimes. It's as simple as that. Because, if they're going to, it's a double-edged sword. If they're going to use a legal system against you, then you need to use it against them. And don't get a lawyer to speak for you. Speak for yourself and ask the right questions. That's the way to deal with this, but we have to be prepared to stand up. Unfortunately, too many people are afraid, that they're scared because they don't have the support which is why I keep saying, join the community connector. And if you're not going to do that, at least bake a cake or something and take it to your neighbours and go meet your neighbours and go watch a ball game with them or something. Get to know them, make friends with them, make friends with the people around you, so that you do have support around you, so that when you stand up and speak the truth, people will listen and people will support what you say.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, community is absolutely essential. I just want to say one thing, though, in the time that we have left with you. A couple of things, actually. You know, they disarmed the people of Australia through a false flag operation. They wanted to do the same thing here. They've tried very hard with Sandy Hook, with the San Bernardino shootings, with all of these school shootings that have, most of which have been proven to be false flag operations or FEMA operations or active shooter drills gone live type of thing. But the American people, by and large, are red-blooded and cherish the Second Amendment. They cherish their right to bear arms because it is the only thing standing between us and an overtly tyrannical government. And the people know it. Even the people, Max, who don't know that 9/11 was a false flag operation know how important the Second Amendment is. So we're not going to let them disarm us. That's number one. Number two, I just want to say that as it pertains to 9/11, I think that although you may be right and they were sloppy about the way 9/11 went down, there were things on 9/11 that were overt mistakes, big, giant mistakes that were not meant to happen the way they happened. Case in point, World Trade Center 7. I think the plane that ultimately went down in Shanksville may have been meant for World Trade Center 7, so then they had to bring it down anyway in broad daylight. The point being that what happened on 9/11, Max, not only woke up me and so many other people, it's woken up nation states. You know, it's woken up world leaders. I mean, I think Vladimir Putin knows very well what went on 9/11, and I think he knows very well what entity is in control of the U.S. government. And he's standing in stark opposition to it, in my estimation. What's your take on Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, look, I know, I realise that he knows what's going on, and he's seeing the need to deal with these people, but I mean, I don't trust the Russians, looking at their track record, looking at what they did after World War II, looking at what they did during World War II. I mean, looking at them, I don't trust anything to do with the Russian government, no matter how much of a nice guy Putin may seem to be. He's doing a lot of what he's doing because it's necessary to secure Russia's borders with this massive refugee crisis going into Europe and everything that's going, NATO moving closer. It's in his best interests to go in and call this out and do what he's doing, but he could call it out a lot more. He could name ISIS as being supported by Israel. If he's got footage to prove that 9/11 was carried out by the United States, like he's rumoured to have, why wasn't it released 14 years ago? You know, there's a lot of questions to Putin's moves. I think he's a player as much as anybody else. Mm-hmm. He's certainly winning the popularity contest at the moment because of his moves against ISIS and the stance he's taking. But he's a player. I don't trust any politicians at all.
Yeah, well, he did just meet with Kissinger. I do know that, and but he does stand in stark opposition to the propagandist criminal mouthpieces we see in the United States government: John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Barack Obama.
Well, yeah.
On the world stage, thank God, you know.
Well, he does to a degree. But then, when he says he supports Palestine, he'll continue to support the push for a Palestinian state, but at the same breath, he supports Israel. And we know Israel's at fault in all this, so he kind of takes a really safe ground in a lot of issues, and he could do a lot more. I mean, he could go in and stop the whole, with what he's done in Syria, and he's got weaponry that can jam all the US electronics and the Israeli electronics on their planes and stuff. He could jam their whole military and go in and supply aid, put troops around Gaza to keep the military forces out, put troops around West Bank to keep the Israelis out, and secure the whole area for the Palestinians if he really cared. Yeah. If I was him, that's what I'd do.
Now, but
the UN can talk about this all they want. The UN can say, "Oh, Gaza's in a terrible state. It's facing the end of its days. It's disappearing. Oh my God, it's on a terrible trajectory." Okay, well, what are you doing about it? Have you sent the UN peacekeepers there? Hamas has been asking for UN peacekeepers to come and stand at Rafah border and stay at Erez Crossing and stand around all of the Israeli borders for the last 5 years. Why haven't the UN sent any peacekeepers there? You pretend to care, and you keep calling them terrorists. They've been asking the UN to come there and put peacekeepers there. Pretends to care. So, a lot of it is theatre. It really is. It gets me incredibly mad. It really does. We could heal this situation so very quickly. And Putin, I mean, he says a lot of the right stuff, and he does a lot of the right stuff, but he's still a player. He's still a player.
Well, Yeah, but it is amazing to see what he did in Syria, right? I mean, he essentially called the Pentagon out and said, look, you want help fighting ISIS? We'll help you fight ISIS. And then he devastated John McCain's crew, the mercenaries that are bought and paid for by the Pentagon. And he has on the world stage essentially called them exactly that, mercenaries. He knows what they're being paid, and he knows who's paying them. And as far as that morsel of truth goes, I welcome it, my God, because the lies and the propaganda coming out of the United States government have reached an epic proportion where I think the rest of the world is just looking at this government and laughing and saying, you got to be kidding me. You guys are $19 trillion in debt, and you're going to continue with this insane war on terror garbage when we know that it's doublespeak? I mean, it literally is Orwellian doublespeak, Max.
Oh, it is. It's Israel's war. That's the thing. All these wars are proxy wars being fought for Israel. And because you've got Israel controlling U.S. foreign policy, while this is all going on, while you're $19 trillion in debt, Obama ups the spending to Israel, gives them an extra $1 billion every year. So it's up to $7.3 billion a year or something now, goes to Israel, and ups the spending for the war in Europe and ups the spending for the war in Syria, which are all proxy wars for Israel. So that's why all that's being done. It's all because of the dual citizens that run U.S. foreign policy. So I mean, Putin's done a lot of stuff, but again, he's done it because he needs to. Because if it was allowed to continue the way it was going to threaten Russia's borders. He has to stop it. It's in Putin's best interest to make sure Assad stays in power and that Syria becomes stable again. I mean, they're friends. They've supported each other for a long time, Assad and Putin. So it stands to reason that he'd been there supporting. But he's only doing enough to kind of maintain face and to keep people back from Russia's borders. He's got the technology, like I said, to be able to go in and jam all those weapon systems right. And remember, he disabled the entire U.S. fleet in the Black Sea last year. Mm-hmm. That fighter plane flew over with that jamming device. Mm-hmm. And apparently they did it again with some Israeli fighter jets when they came into Syria and started bombing. They declared what their airspace was. Okay, this is Russian airspace. Any planes that come in here, you'll be told to turn around. And a couple of Israeli jets went in there, and the Russians disabled their entire flight system and their entire communication systems and all their weapon systems with this jamming device, and then contacted them on old analog radio and told them to turn around and hightail it back to Tel Aviv, which they instantly did. Yeah. So Russia has the technology to actually go in there and stop this whole thing pretty swiftly if they wanted to. So,
well, you know what I like, though?
There's a play going on here, and there's a play going on,
Yeah, there is a play, but on this world stage, the actor that Putin, the role that he's playing is one that I welcome because it may keep American young men and women from dying in Syria. I mean, there was an exasperated John Kerry who just over this past weekend said, what do you want from me? Do you want me to go to war with the Russians? I mean, because he can't win this propaganda war in Syria. He can't win the proxy war in Syria. This proxy army, the ISIS proxy army that is under the control of the U.S. government, can't win against the Russians. And if that is going to keep us out of another unconstitutional war of aggression, my God, do I welcome that. And I think the American people do too. We are all so tired of war. Anybody who is awake and isn't drinking the Kool-Aid, the Pentagon Kool-Aid in this country, is sick and tired of war, Max. And that's the good news, is that humanity is sick and tired of war. We're sick and tired of this debt-based death machine. We're sick and tired of the Zionist Rothschild-Rockefeller death machine. And it leads me to my last question before we lose you. With this global economic collapse that we talk a lot about at SGT Report, appearing to be accelerating right now, Max, do you think that the potential death of the dollar in the future will somehow be a savior for humanity, or will the powers that be just roll us into some other currency, some other world currency, in order to consolidate their power and keep us enslaved?
Well, I think they have another plan. I think the death of the dollar will forebode very bad. You've got to understand that it all runs on the economic system. You've got supermarket shelves that have 3 days worth of food in them. Yeah. So if the dollar implodes and the trucks stop flowing, it'll be a massive depopulation that'll occur because society will basically just eat itself. There'll be riots in the streets. It'll be pretty chaotic. And I think that it is planned, and I think that will be the way a lot of the depopulation occurs, will be through crashing the economic system. Unless they can really lock things down and get things in place and be able to bring about martial law very quickly, it'll just turn very ugly. But I don't think they'll worry about martial law. They might try. There might be a token effort. But I think if the dollar crashes, it will get ugly. But it doesn't have to get to that point. I mean, like I said, the massive awakening that we're seeing on Earth now I really think that humanity's going to rise up to this occasion. I really do. I think people can see how they're being played. And it could get ugly if the media pushes it and they can do it quick enough before the more sleepy masses wake up. But the uglier it's getting, the more and more people are waking up. Like the curve is exponential now. So I don't think they're going to get away with it. I really think humanity's going to rise to the occasion with this. I really do. And sure, I welcome what Putin's doing as well. I certainly welcome that someone stepped up to do what he's doing. It needs to be done. But I don't see him as the savior of mankind. I certainly don't, because I just don't trust the Russians. I certainly don't want to go down that way and under their type of rule.
Right.
But I think we're not going to be under any type of rule eventually. I think we're going to lead to self-determination through all of this. I think this is one of the greatest opportunities in human history. I think the wheels are falling off the system. Everything they're doing is wrong. It's all falling apart. They've gone too quickly. They're stumbling. They're falling. The blinders are falling away from so many people. The veil is lifting. People are seeing it for what it is. I think Putin's even possibly doing this to just give us a little bit of a reprieve and just nudge us into a little bit more wakefulness and just kind of hold things at bay for us and give us the opportunity to actually stand up and call this. Because we've got to stand up and call it peacefully in the right way. If we just elapse into revolution, then it'll bring down the fall of the rest of the world, and China and Russia will just move in and take over all their countries. So we don't want to go that way. All the people that are calling for civil war and violent revolution, they're not seeing how they're being played with that. They'll just open up a power vacuum by which some powerful nation will step in. And it won't matter how many guns you've got. They won't care about Americans. They'll just shoot you all anyway. And they've got a lot of technology, like I said, the Russians. They can jam all of that stuff anyway. So, I think a lot of what's happening here is it's providing us an opportunity. I think that might even be what one of Putin's plays is. I don't think he's completely anti-human, but I think he knows that he can't save the world either. The people of the West have to stand up, and they have to do it in the right way, and he's giving us a little bit of reprieve so that we can regroup and hopefully do that. The matter is whether we choose to step up to the plate and actually take responsibility for ourselves.
Perfectly said, Max. And, guys, it's not often that we're able to address ways that each of us can get involved to help take it back, to help take humanity back, that each of us can get involved to make changes for the good. And Max has given us one of the tools today, and it's fullcircleproject.net. And I invite you to go there, check it out, participate, find events and people in your community that you can join with to help raise awareness and take the power back from those that want to enslave humanity. And of course, you can visit Max's website at thecrowhouse.com. And Max Igan has been our guest. Max, is there any way that we can support you? Do you have a donate button? People would love to support a truth teller like you.
Look, there's a donate button on the website, but at the moment, all I can accept is direct transfers. I've had all my PayPals shut down. They just keep doing it. That's the way Australia works. They keep shutting down PayPals. I've had 4 PayPals shut down now, so it's very difficult for me to get a PayPal account. People can make direct contributions via the website, or they can send Western Union or something like that. That's all I've got at the moment. I'm trying to find another method to be able to receive contributions, because it's getting very hard to make ends meet at the moment.
Oh, Max, I'm sorry to hear that. Is there a direct link to be able to do a transfer to you? How do we find that on your website?
Well, you can just go there and click the donate button. It'll take you to the page where the bank details are. You've just got to log into your bank account and put in my details and transfer money across. And in Australia, if they figure out what you're doing, they just close down your PayPal. They send you all these questionnaires that you can't possibly answer. They want your passport details. They want fucking everything from you. It's ridiculous.
Well, they're fascists, and that's what they want to do with this global banking system. They want to ban cash. They want to get everybody, beholden to these big banks. And if they don't agree with your politics, they'll just turn off your chip.
Exactly.
That's where they want to take us.
Yeah.
All right, Max. Well,
no worries, brother. We'll talk soon.
Well, Max, thank you so much. And guys, thank you for your support at sgtreport.com. It means the world to us. Real news, 24/7. Check us out at thelibertymill.com as well. And of course, visit Max at thecrowhouse.com. Go to the donate button. He really could use your support. Thanks for listening. God bless.